to my database project. This project is going to be on the database for MPCARLIMO, which is a driving service similar to Uber, but we have customers, drivers, vehicles, locations, rides, payment, and rating. These are some of the tables. So right off the top, let's just go over some of the tables. So like I said, we have the customer, which has first name, last name, driver, very similar to customer. The vehicle, which has the foreign key from driver. So each driver is going to have a vehicle. And then each customer is going to have a location where there'll be a pickup location or a drop-off location. Next up, we have the ride, which takes in both the customer ID and the driver ID, along with the vehicle ID too. So that ride is going to take in a lot of information. And then there's going to be payments for the ride and ratings too. So next up, we'll look at some of the views, procedures, functions. So these were some of the views I created. We had the average distance per ride, the driver ride count, driver stats, payment summary, and popular locations. So this is what some of the views look like. We have this one, which is the average distance per ride. And next up is the driver stats, which shows some information about the drivers. Following that is the total distance by customer, which shows how many miles each customer have traveled. And next up is the procedures. We have the get customer rides, which returns the customer rides, of course, and the update ride status procedure, which will update the status to being paid or not paid. So this is the first one for get customer rides. We can see the code right here where it gets the customer ride, and this is what it returns when we call it. All right, so next up is the procedure for the update ride status. This one is going to check if, well, it's actually going to update it if paid. And right here, it checks if the payment has been made on the ride. And if it's unpaid, then it's going to be unpaid. If it's paid, then it's paid. And of course, we can see over here some of the statuses. It goes based off ride ID, and this one's paid, paid, unpaid. And if we were to enter in, 9 next to this update ride status, we'd of course either get paid or unpaid. So after this was some of the functions I created. We had the get customer full name and the get driver full name, which are very similar. And then we had get average distance and get total revenue. So this is some of them listed right over there. So the first one right here is get customer full name, which just returns the first name and the last name combined. Next up over here is the get average distance, which is going to get the average distance of all the rides. And following that, we're going to get total revenue, which just returns the total revenue for the whole company. And we can go into some of the code after. Next up is the payment status trigger and the audit trail trigger. So this is the audit trail trigger. It's, to make sure that the customer table is updating properly. But the main status over here would be the payment status trigger, which is just going to get updated every time, we insert a payment. We're going to set that status to paid on the ride, kind of like a ride ID back there. Next up is normalization. Normalization is a big part of the project. We wanted to make sure that we're creating, tables for each entity and that these are identified by the foreign keys necessary. So like we saw earlier, each one had their own foreign key. And so the first thing was the first normal form, and we ensured that each column in the table contained the values and that there were no repeating groups or arrays. And then the second normal form, which was ensuring that every non-key attribute was functional. And then finally, we had the third normal form, which was making sure that each of those non-key attributes were dependent only on a primary key and not any of the other not primary keys, And then here's another form on normalization, another slide on it, just to get, a little bit more broken down into it. After that is some of the integrity enforcement. And here are some of the primary key constraints, just a little overview of what a primary constraint is, and then going into the foreign key constraint. So over here we had the customer table, which had customer ID, and then the ride, which takes in that customer ID, and of course ride takes in other ones. So just going over kind of what a foreign key is. And then these were some of the isolation levels that we used. So we had the read committed and the repeatable read. So when taking in like payments, we want to use this repeatable read just to make sure that, we're not choosing an isolation level that would get dirty reads or non-repeatable reads, or even phantom reads. So we want to make sure we stay away from those. Next up is some of the CRUD operations. We have the insert, update, delete, and this is for the customer, the vehicle, and the ride. I didn't go through all of them, but this is just kind of an overview of, kind of what it looks like. Finally is the reports. So for the views we had over here, does a good job of reporting on what's going on in the company. So the payment summary view, the driver stats view, the popular locations view shows where our customers are going, and the total distance by customer view, it's definitely good for reporting. Next up in the database is, areas for improvement where we could go on and, improve our things. So adding a real location calculation. I know that Google Maps has an API that I looked into, but getting it implemented in the project seemed kind of like a big task at the moment. But once we get this implemented, we could go on to adding location calculated costs, just kind of, taking in the pickup information, the drop off, and just automatically calculating it. So right over here, this is a picture of our ER diagram. We have the customers. Each customer could have many rides. A customer could have many locations, like pickup or drop off location. The drivers, they could have many rides, and they could also have many vehicles. Each vehicle could be associated with many rides, and each ride could have many ratings, for the customer rating, the driver rating, and of course, we could have multiple payments too. So in conclusion, that's just kind of going over some of the information there. Hey, all right, so this is the PHP My Admin. So right over here, we could see some of the procedures, some of the functions, and of course some of the different views like I was talking about earlier in the project. So now let's just go ahead and look at the website. So we could start off from home, customers. Let's go ahead and add a new customer. Their name can be John and last name new, email jn@jn.com. And the phone after can just be a bunch of 8s right there. We'll go ahead and submit that, and we see John New is right there. So let's add a driver for John New. We'll call this John's driver. License number can be anything, KL30. And the phone number will be 00222. All right. So now that we have those customers and drivers, let's give John's driver a vehicle. We're going to make it a Chevy Altima. And the year will be a 2023. License plate can be FGF 7856. All right, we see it shows up right there. So now let's add a location for our customer here, which is John New, not John Poole. His address will be 222 Street. City will be city. State will be state. And the zip code will be 10982. And that can be his home address. All right, so there's that one. Now let's go to a ride, and let's create a new ride. So here we can see we can take in all our customers. So John New is the customer. The driver will be John's driver. The vehicle, we could put that Chevy Altima that we created. And pickup time, we can go to there at, we can edit this, but that looks good for right now. The pickup location will be at 222 City Street. And the drop-off location can be 93 Eastview Lane. The distance will be 23 miles. And the duration, we'll just put in some of these numbers right here. All right. So we could see that this came in properly. And the payment status currently is unpaid. So if we go to payments, we can add a new payment. Let's say that John, right there, John's new driver, he paid us $200, and he's going to pay us with a cash payment. So we could submit it, and we see that it's paid here. If we look back at rides, it's now paid, updated. And now let's go over here, and we'll set this new driver, well, the new ride, and we'll put a rating of 5 stars. Customer was good. The driver, let's give him a 4. And then we could say, went well, comma, bad traffic. All right. And then we can see, yep, right there, everything updated properly. We go back, everything's still in place. And right over here on rides too, let's just add a new ride just so I could demonstrate what's going on over there. Subaru pickup time, that's good. Location, drop off location, distance 20. And that right there can be 9. All right. So we see here it's unpaid. We could filter by status. We can go between paid and unpaid trips too, which is good for finding out who we have to charge in the future. All right. So that's the database. These are some of the views. And thank you. Thank you for